Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. Adam is a passionate advocate for the power of secure attachment to address many of today's societal challenges. With a robust online presence, he has cultivated an impressive following, over 500,000 on social media, where he leads a movement to redefine human connection. Adam emphasizes principles like honesty, direct communication, clear boundaries, and trust as foundational to building secure and healthy relationships. Leveraging his extensive clinical experience and deep insights, Adam provides a fresh take on the vital importance of attachment in human lives. He engages audiences worldwide through his compelling episodes on the I Wish You Knew podcast and his dynamic online presentations, including live streams and recorded videos. His work has motivated individuals, families, and couples globally to embark on a path of relationship repair and secure attachment development. Adam Lane Smith, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
It is a joy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. You're the attachment bro, but my question is, why aren't you the divorce bro, the social media marketing bro, the red pill bro, the spiritual love guru on an ayahuasca journey in Costa Rica bro? Why are you not that guy?
I grew up with attachment issues. I grew up in an environment where everybody else had attachment issues. I was 13 years old trying my friends to not end their life. I was trying up late at night, 13 years old, on a phone call, trying to convince people that their life was worth living. That's been my life for as long as I can remember, is doing all of that. So by the time I turned 18, 19, 20, someone pointed out that I could actually do that as a career, get some professional training, do it better, and maybe even make a living out of it. So I went into therapy and I fixed my own attachment as I went through. Nobody in therapy school wanted to talk about attachment theory. They tell you it's for babies, it's not important. If it's a real problem, it'll be a personality disorder. Don't sweat it. And attachment theory is just this old weird thing. But it became everything to me. It was everything that I'd ever seen. It was the answer to fixing every other problem. It was the foundation, at least, that we could start building a better system from and go back to and say, if you feel this, here's why. And as I've gone through, I've studied the science behind it. I've talked with people like Dr. Sue Carter from the Kinsey Institute, one of the leading experts in the world on oxytocin and vasopressin bonding, and gathered information from her and her research, just world-class research that she's doing. Attachment really is the vehicle for everything else. Now, is there opportunities for attachment maybe in ayahuasca journeys and going to Costa Rica and doing all these other cool things? You know what? Maybe, but I think we need to get attachment right first. People always ask me, Adam, is this attachment? Is that attachment? You know what? We won't know until we fix attachment. And right now, 35% of people have secure attachment. 65% of young people in the next generation have broken attachment. So the problem's getting worse. Let's fix it, and then let's figure out what else is going on.
I was listening to another content creator recently in the more masculine space of the internet. And a statement was made was, I don't believe in attachment styles. And when I get confronted with it, when a question pops up, I automatically debunk it. I think it's really important to establish what are the four main attachment styles and is it real?
Is it real? No, that's fair. That's fair because a lot of people say it sounds stupid. A
Right.
lot of people say this is how I've always been. Avoidant men in particular say, Adam, this is ridiculous. You're just talking about feelings. What is attachment? Attachment is the way that we as kids learn that other people are going to be reliable and will help us meet our needs, or they won't. And you can break in one of two ways. If you learn that, if for example, if your parents take care of you, they reason you through problems, they talk with you, they help you solve issues, they listen to you, they're not arbitrary or hurtful. They don't have to be perfect, but they work with you person to person. It's good enough to build secure attachment. And again, only 1/3 of the next generation has that. So we're doing real bad if you break in one of two ways. And it's a survival adaptation mode that clicks on. It's built for 1,000 years ago. The Vikings come, they burn your village to the ground, they kidnap you, they take you back to Denmark. Now you're a slave. You will react in one of two ways in that circumstance. You will either knuckle under and believe that the people who are hurting you have a reason to because you're unlovable. And you will say, I don't deserve love. I don't deserve care. I am going to bow down and please everybody else and be very approval seeking. And hopefully, someone somewhere will take care of me. and you lose all sense of power and control in your life. You despise yourself more than anybody else, and you think that you have to find someone to rescue you and help you feel better in life. And that's anxious attachment style, nice guy syndrome. I was having dinner with Dr. Robert Glover, if you know him, not long ago, and we were talking about nice guy syndrome and then the anxious attachment, how it's on the rise. And
Right.
it is, unfortunately. But the other way that we break is avoidant attachment style. We say other people are not to be trusted. They're not to be opened up to. I don't even have feelings. I don't have the luxury of feelings. This world is cold and hard. Nobody can be counted on. The only thing to be counted on is safety, as in walls, and resources, as in money. Those are the only two things I can rely on in this world. I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get both of them. Some people in this category are very manipulative and hurtful over others. Some are very ethical and they just stay away from other people and they disconnect from humans, and their brain chemistry shifts and it becomes very opposed to any kind of bonding at all. And they don't really understand what love is. They just try to survive in this world. And yes, there is a fourth, what we call disorganized style. Some people call it fearful avoidant. It's a blend of the two. It's where you've been hurt so bad as a kid over and over that just one of these breakings wasn't enough. You then also broke a second time. So not only do you not trust yourself, but you also don't trust other people. And no matter where the power is, if it's with you, you freak out because you can't handle it. And if it's with other people, you're afraid that they're going to misuse it against you. So it's very chaotic, and you have a hard time in relationships at all. Your relationships will be very short-lived and very chaotic. Those are the four attachment styles. So everybody out there listening right now, if these are resonating with you, you're in good company. You're in about two-thirds of people now in the next generation.
You've mentioned the next generation a couple times. We're definitely going to touch on that throughout the podcast. And I recently had an episode with Dr. Robert Glover, and we'll touch on nice guy syndrome a little bit later on. But we're going to bounce around here and there with some things. You had a Twitter post recently. Most of the relationship skills you learned from your parents are not relationship skills at all, they're leftover trauma behaviors from several messed up generations. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed that the baby boomers are not very good at staying married?
Oh, yes, I
Have you
have.
noticed that the baby boomers have some weird resentment toward their own parents? And it's just, and they can't really pin down why they have
Eh,
resentment. They just do. And their children. Have you
No.
noticed that there's two sets of children from the boomers? One is from the first set of their marriages, generations X and Y, and the second set from their second marriage, the millennials. Have you noticed that?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is not to say it's the boomers' fault, but
I mean,
100 years ago,
but
110 years ago, we had this little thing called World War One. At the same time, we had this little thing called the Industrial Revolution. And both of those factored in together to create this huge dramatic shift where, number one, people, especially in America, shifted from rural into cities in the 1920s. 1920, it was the first time more Americans lived in cities than in rural. And it's not that cities are magically bad, it's that you shatter the family units and the networks and the connections and the extended kith and kin networks and all the connections you've had for generations. You shatter them and you move people into cities where they're surrounded by hostile neighbors, into areas that are not conducive for real connection and bonding. And then you have them work 16 hours a day. It was actually in the 1910s and the 1920s, it was common to have a 180 to 100-hour work week for the average worker. It wasn't until Ford came along and created the 40-hour work week that it really cut down. And he was actually sued by his rivals for that, because they said it was unrealistic to work your workers so little and pay them so well. So that people don't realize that our ancestors were working 100 hours when they went from family farms, friends, family, people they grew up with, getting married to the girl next door, into factory jobs, working 100 hours a week in conditions that would leave you mutilated and broken, where you could only drink yourself to sleep at night just to get up the next day and do another 16-hour shift, and that your wife and kids were aliens to you, and your kids would grow up in ghetto neighborhoods with surrounded by just flocks of other kids that didn't have the family connections they needed either. And this was one generation that experienced that drastic overhaul. Then we rolled into World War One, which was a meat grinder, and it killed a tremendous number of men and left the rest of them just shell shocked, where they would watch their friends be shredded by artillery shells this big that would then explode into shrapnel this big that would shatter out and puncture holes into the dozens of men around them. And you'd watch your best friend turn into like a fine red mist right next to you. And you'd go home and bury like his finger, because that was all that you could piece together. So that was that generation. We call them the silent generation, or the lost generation is usually what we call them. And next came the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. There was the Roaring Twenties in there to try to binge on dopamine and forget the pain. But then the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, more loss, more tragedy, more hurt. That generation managed to survive that. Then they rolled into World War II, and that was a hell on earth as well. Another meat grinder where we just destroyed and obliterated men with all new kinds of weapons, and just an absolute slaughter fest. And this is the greatest generation, the silent generation, the lost generation, the greatest depression, or the greatest generation, just barely surviving. And what they taught their kids was stay tough. No one's coming to help you. You have to save every little rusty nail because you may never get another one. Shoes are a luxury. Me feeding you is my measurement of love for you. Don't talk to me about your problems or feelings because I have to work an 18-hour shift and my arm got ripped off yesterday.
Yeah.
So that was the parenting system back then. I'll give you something to cry about. And then they raised the boomers. And the boomers grew up in a world of wars that they hated, arbitrary political wars that they hated overseas for various reasons. We can argue about that if we wish, but they didn't agree to them. They grew up in a world where their parents were just, hey, I'll give you something to cry about. How dare you have feelings? I will give you this can of rusty nails as your inheritance. And half of the boomers got it and understood that was love and that you had to knuckle down and try to survive. Half of them understood. Half of them did not. And they said, screw the man. I hate my parents. I hate everyone. Authority is evil. Anyone having power over me is evil. Marriage is evil. Family is evil. How dare you have responsibilities and expectations for me? They're currently tripling their divorce rates, by the way, in their 70s and 80s. Many of them are just waiting for their spouse to die because it will be more convenient than going through a divorce. And that's the baby boomer generation. Their first sets of kids, Gen X and Gen Y, they were raised for a world that does not exist anymore. They were raised on family values. They were raised on conservatism. They were raised on patriotism. They were raised on all kinds of things people are nostalgic for. That world was obliterated. And the baby boomers divorced their families and said, hey, sometimes love just doesn't work. And Gen X and Gen Y said, what do you mean? Love is supposed to be a great thing. Families forever. You told us that. Yeah, it doesn't work out. Here's some money. Go watch a movie. I'm going to go bang this chick next door. And that was the second wave. Then they rolled into banging their mistresses, and the mistresses that they cheated on in the first marriage, now they married them and had the millennials. And they said, man, my first set of kids, they're weak. They're pathetic. I will not raise kids like that. I'm going to harden these guys. I'm going to toughen up this next generation of millennials. And man, do they hate each other. Millennials have been raised in a family system that doesn't work. They've never seen a functioning family, really, most of them. They haven't seen a system where the family stays together. A lot of them are second marriage kids, or the earliest millennials are first marriage kids that then quickly broke up. Most of them have not been raised on family values or family anything like that we're all nostalgic for. They just understand everybody for themselves, do what's good for you, get what you can and get out. And then they have given way now to Generation Z, which has living in the rubble of a greater civilization, really is what it is. Not to gloss over the ugly parts of our American history, but these survival adaptations, they click on during social catastrophe. They click on when our environment is so broken that we will not be able to survive with other people. We have to try to knuckle under or we have to fight for scraps. So the fact that 65% of the next generation is in survival mode for a catastrophe tells us the collapse has already happened. It's just that our systems are keeping the corpse alive. And we are living in the ruins of a civilization, is what we are. So that is why I say parenting now is really just survival adaptations. We are trying to relearn what it looks like. We are trying to understand how to love our kids. We are trying to understand how to give them secure attachment so they can build something next. And on the ruins, they can build over the ruins of Rome with the new buildings of London, of Paris, of whatever their building will be. But they are going to have to build something new, and we have to give them those skills.
What does the outlook actually look like for Gen Z?
It's an even worse meat grinder than we can really comprehend. Gen Z is divided into those who are tough enough to survive and are going to hang on by their fingernails and are building and are grinding and are forming connections and they're learning about attachment and they're learning security. A lot of them come into my channels and my DMs and everything and they say, Adam, I've never heard this before. You've clicked in something that hasn't been in my family for 5 generations. And they're learning. There's that pool. And I believe they will make it. I really do believe they will build something phenomenal coming next. Not a utopia, but the next great real civilization that I think is coming. And the other half, are so collapsed into this idea that everyone else must cater to my feelings, that everybody else must respond to me, everybody else must do what I need them to do, or I can't live my daily life. They are so collapsed into their fear and they are so powerless and they are afraid of even trying to take power that they've never seen function before. The self removal rates of these people is astronomical. Pediatricians have been trying for years now to sound the alarm amount around self-removal rates of 11-year-old children and how that's going catastrophically high, more than we've ever seen before. And nobody is listening to the pediatrician sounding this alarm because it's very inconvenient. But the next generation is going to go through a meat grinder, and many of them will not make it. I hesitate to say most of them won't make it, but many of them will not make it. It's really going to come down to those of us who are in our generation to give them every skill and every resource and every assistance that we can so that they can build something next for the survivors. I know that sounds bleak, but I really think that's what we've created over the last 100 years.
No, I can tell you from what I've seen anecdotally, and what it looks like is if you don't have some sort of mental health disorder or issue or problem, then you're not part of the cool crowd. It's become something that has become so popular that I have to have some sort of dysfunction in life. Otherwise, I just don't fit in with the rest of the group of my friends. And I'm
Why do
wondering
you
if you've
think
seen
that
some.
is? What do you think is the benefit of that? Because B.F. Skinner said the organism is always right. There's always a purpose. There's always a benefit. What do you think is the benefit to that?
Everything is always comes back to community. It's something that's innate. It's inside of us. We want to feel like we belong to something greater than ourselves. And in an area, especially when you're young, where you don't feel like there's many outlets for you to fit into a particular group, this gives the people that are often ostracized or outside of athletics and other areas of opportunity for community and connection. It gives them a purpose and a sense of being able to express themselves in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, loved, and understood within the context of their social group that they might not be getting at home because both parents are working, they're going through, and they're just surviving. They're doing the best they can, if there is even two parents. We also have an epidemic of single mothers out there that are struggling to find and bring together families that might resemble something more traditional if they can.
I think so. Here's something. Can I share an idea I've been playing with in my head about where
Please
our
do.
society's at? There's this thing like we talked about called anxious attachment. And what the difference really is avoidant people, they never really get that oxytocin bonding hormone that they need in their brain, that warmth, that affection, that kindness, that safety feeling. They never really get that. People who have anxious attachment, they get it, but it's inconsistent. And as it's taken away in childhood for a variety of reasons and given and then taken away and given and taken away, they can't discern a pattern to it. So they start to blame themselves and they say it must be because something's wrong with me that's unacceptable, then that's why people don't love me. And they become really fiends, like junkies for this oxytocin. They chase it. They obsess over anybody that can give it to them. They crave other people to help them feel good by being accepted. And it makes them codependent. And it makes them do all kinds of things to try to get that acceptance and that love. And what I see is a sense of powerlessness of my brain doesn't work right. I'm scared. I'm upset all the time. Aha, if I have a diagnosis, then that's a permanent reason that I can log that I never have to fight to get better because that's why I don't feel good. I never have to fight to improve. I never have to change. I can just call it a diagnosis. And now everybody has to accept me. Everybody has to validate me. Everybody has to say, yes, this is okay. And then I have an excuse not to try and not to fight for power and not to improve. I can leverage this even on other people if needed and use it as a form of power and control. And I will vote for the people who give me the ability to leverage it even harder upon other people because they're the only ones who care about me. And this group of people is most likely to be victimized and manipulated by people with personality disorders who will come along and flood them on purpose with oxytocin, which is a process called love bombing. There's a process called gaslighting. There's a process called future faking. There's all kinds of behaviors that these people can exhibit, but politicians often have personality disorders. That's why they climb the ranks as hard as they do. And they can come along and promise all kinds of protection. They can come along and promise all kinds of validation. They can come along and punish people for not giving you the attention and validation and acceptance that you're looking for. And that reaches right down into this group of people who have always felt powerless and scared and terrified and craving this addiction in their brain. and it can make them feel loved and accepted. Yes, there's the community element as well, because then they could say, we are all together. We all have this thing wrong with us, and we all love and accept each other. But it will create fundamental instability in those communities as well, because those communities aren't based on growth and change and improvement. Those communities are based on how big is your problem and how much power can you use that to gain and bludgeon other people with. And it's perfectly built for sociopathic behavior then to come in and steal that power and say, I have 5 diagnoses and you only have 3. I have power. You must get down on the floor and grovel to me, and I will be your master because I am the one who is most victimized here. I think that's what we're seeing is a confluence of all of those events. That's what my brain has told me so far and what I've pieced together. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think I'm off in left
So
field?
I don't think that you are, because I can tell you from what I saw in my time in law enforcement, there's a very similar story across the board of people who are in that poor and poverty stricken area where there is a mother and she is off working. She's a CNA.
Mhm.
She's working so many hours a week, and there's 4 other children that have to be tended to and cared for. That's usually where a friend, a neighbor, or a family member who is deeply inconsistent in all the wrong ways, maybe they're around, maybe they're up the street hanging with somebody else having a conversation. The kids are left on their own to have these experiences and to go through life, and that can be extremely detrimental to their physical, mental, and emotional growth, to not feeling like somebody's committed to them, that they're there for them, that they're going to be for them, that they can trust other people in this space. And so then it can feed into this victim mentality of somebody's going to come and save me one day. I'm in this place where I have this dream, I have this hope, I have this wish that, oh man, just one day somebody's going to save me. And as you grow up and you navigate that environment and you get to this place, you do fall prey to people that recognize that area of weakness inside of you, or that place that they can exploit, and they use that, and you are always constantly looking for that. And that's why we look to politicians in that same space and say, please help us, save us, protect us, do something for us to help us rise above to that next level, because we so desperately want to be there.
And I have 2 thoughts from that. One, that's I call that the wizard mentality. A wizard is gonna come save me someday and tell me that I'm special. That's why Harry Potter was so popular, was he was this broken down kid that saw a wizard came to save him and launch him into this wonderful life. Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, same thing, although very different story. But
Yeah.
that's that wizard. Someday a wizard will come. I will get my note to Hogwarts. I will blah blah blah. That's why many of the people in that crowd, they absolutely adore Harry Potter, and they have for all of their life, and they so identify with it because they're waiting to be told, "You're special, come join us," is what they're waiting for, that rescue. And number 2, what you're describing is the poorer neighborhoods who
Yeah.
they're relying on family and friends, what we call kith and kin networks, to try to watch the kids, and it's not going well. But even upper scale, middle class, right? They have daycare, inconsistent
Yes.
workers, overstaffed daycares. Not that every daycare is evil, but Canada ran a gigantic decades-long study on the effects of daycare. It was horrific, and people need to read that study on Canadian daycare because it's brutal. If you think that doing daycare is better for your kids, it's catastrophic in many cases. And even at upper levels of society, then you have nannies who often will trade out. You have governesses, or they used to, but you have that structure, upper level daycare programs, boarding schools, inconsistency, lack of emotional connection, lack of intimacy, that lack of oxytocin bonding. This is why from the lower levels of society up to the absolute upper levels of society, you have what is it? Massive like Ivy League protests going on right now of people saying, "You I demand you care for my feelings and that you do X, Y, or Z." There's giant counter protests going on right now, even as we speak, and arrests being made. And I'm not coming down for or against any cause at all on this. I'm just saying the way that people are relating to each other is not the way humans are designed to relate to each other. These are extreme survival adaptations. People are tribalizing around that. People are forming tribal identities around their fear and terror. And now they're trying to form a coalition against their perceived enemies, which is anybody that doesn't cater to their feelings and take care of them and make them feel safe.
If
And
you're
the
not with me,
politicians
you're
are on
against
top of
me.
that. Yeah, and the politicians are on top of that. They're
Yeah,
driving that on every side. Again, this is not a political discussion. It's
it is
the
not.
politicians from every company, from every country throughout all of human history step in when people are scared and divided and say, I am the person with the solution. They are bad. I will help you hit them with sticks. And then you join up with that guy, and then they usually don't keep their promises. They just tax you even more than the first guy did. But that's been politics for all of human history. But it comes back to attachment. It comes back to the
Yes.
way we're raising our children or not.
Everything is ultimately attachment. And it goes into your book, Slaying Your Fear. You brilliantly talk about these concepts as insecure and detached. I love the way that you did that because I think it's going to be so relatable for so many people who are entry level, just getting into this, just discovering what is attachment. I'm not quite understanding this. So, can you explain for us what is detachment?
Yeah, detachment is the beginner word I sprinkled in there. Look, if you're not fully connected with other people and you feel lonely and you feel frustrated at how your relationships are not as connected as they should be, if you feel like your friendships aren't as deep as they could be, if people tend to walk away from you, if you feel like there's just so much missing in your life and you wish your relationships were more than they were, but you don't know how to reach out and talk to people, you likely have an attachment issue. Whether you're anxiously attached and you're approval seeking, or you're avoidantly attached and you've got a wall between you and other people. Either way, you never learned how to form the connections. But relationships, they don't just happen. A baby doesn't pop out and they know how to build a marriage. They got to watch through the marriage they grow up in, hopefully, God willing. They grow up in a good marriage and they say, oh, that's how you resolve conflicts. Oh, that's how you solve problems. Oh, that's how you ask about each other's day. Oh, that's how you build emotional intimacy. Oh, that's how you slap mom on the butt. Oh, that's how you hold hands. Oh, that's how you share a kiss. Oh, that's how you renew your vows. Oh, that's how you handle hard times and stress times. Oh, that's how you apologize when you've been grumpy and do something wrong. Oh, that's how you do those things. Those are skills that the little baby brain learns up until they're 12 years old, even longer than that, maybe. Those are skills we have to learn. And if you didn't grow up having those, oh, that's how you do that moments, then you grow up in the, oh God, how am I going to get through this? What is going to minimize my pain and just help me get through? And those are the skills you have probably learned. So that's why you can't just magic your way into a great relationship because you haven't learned all the skills you need. And what you've learned is fear and pain and avoidance of pain. And that's why dating sucks right now. That's why marriage sucks right now.
Yeah.
That's why parenting is hard right now.
A question that pops up a lot for people who have an insecure attachment is, what does secure attachment look like? How do they act and how can I identify that?
It's weird. It's weird. It's like a fairy tale.
Yeah,
So
it's this coveted thing. It's just yeah.
I call it the best way to illustrate this is the different two different dating pools, and I call it the firefly method. There's red fireflies that signal to each other insecure attachment with flashes of feelings at the beginning. They rush through compatibility testing. They just give each other good feelings. They compliment each other. They make each other feel really good. It's floods of dopamine and floods of oxytocin and just overwhelming like feel. I have a bad life story. Oh man, I feel so bad for you. What about you? Oh wow, I'll make you feel better. We're going to take care of each other. It'll be such a great relationship. Yay. And then they immediately jump into bed and they start rolling through it. And they get to about 7 months. The novelty dopamine dies. And now they're looking at each other saying, we've never compatibility tested. We don't really have trust. The good feelings are starting to go away. What do you want to do? I don't know. Let's try to figure this out. And it goes pretty badly. Even if they do manage to make it, they'll end up divorced usually down the road 10, 15 years in, sometimes 20 years. I wrote a book on that, Exhausted Wives, Bewildered Husbands, that it just destroys your relationships. This is why 98% of dating relationships tend to break up right there, is about 5 to 7 months in, the novelty dopamine dies, the avoidant person checks out, the anxious person feels crushed and overwhelmed and says, I hate my life, I don't want to live, and everybody is depressed and miserable. And then they go out and find new partners on the apps. And that's what the apps are right there for. Secure attachment. How is it different? Within the first couple of dates, usually on the first date, a securely attached person will very clearly just say, hey, you know what? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm looking for a long term committed relationship. Is that what you want? Oh, it is? Fantastic. We can have a second date. Great. Hey, do you want kids? Awesome. Where do you want to live? You want to live close to your parents? Where are they? Oh, they're actually pretty close. That's amazing. We're pretty compatible there. Okay. Religious faith. What do you want to raise your kids as? Oh, that. Hey, are you that? Wow, I am too. Hey, it's even better. We're lined up. And they start compatibility testing the hard questions right up front. And when they see you do something wrong, they say, hey, I noticed this. I noticed you said this. You said this thing about your life. You said this. You mentioned drinking. How big are you into drinking? They go there, they
Yeah.
poke and they ask questions because they're not messing around. They really want to know. And to them, they wouldn't take it personally if someone asked them a question because they don't have a lot to hide. They're like, oh, yeah, you know what? I do drink occasionally on the weekends, maybe 1 or 2 beers with a friend. That's been it. And they're honest about that. They don't have something like, oh, I got to hide it. And so they just poke. They go there. They ask the harder questions and they're clear and direct. And then they compatibility test right up front. And then if you ever go back on the things that you've told them, they call you out immediately, not in a bad, abrasive way. They say, hey, I just saw you do this. That's contrary to everything you've told me. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that is a really big thing that they say. Tell me more. They're curious. They want to learn. This is why
Yeah.
they can have conversations with their partner about what's going right, what's going wrong. They can have check-ins on their marriage instead of just, nope, it's fine. We don't have to talk about it. They can
Just
just
gonna
completely
ignore
do
it.
that. And they do this with friends. They do this with work. They do this with their boss. They do this with business partners. They check in and they have the conversations. They ask the questions. They say the things that need to be said. And that's what they were raised to do. It's not
Yeah.
perfect. They're not perfect people. They are healthy people who go the distance and have the conversations to make life simpler. That is secure attachment. And that's why it feels so great, because then your brain chemistry is on point. Then you don't get depressed. Then you're not anxious all the time. Then your wife's sex drive doesn't tank at 2 years. Then you have a great family life and you raise healthy kids and they're ready for the next generation.
I think it's important to point out that they're also going to disappoint you. They're not perfect people. They're going to make mistakes, but
Oh, yeah.
more often than not, they will own up to those mistakes and acknowledge that and then work to repair and go through it together.
Yeah, and you know what that looks like? It's a breach in trust. And they
Yeah.
come to you because they're self-policing and they have values and morals and they say, "Hey, you know what? I did something I don't like. I'm sorry. That was incredibly inappropriate that I did that. Here's how I'm going to fix it and what can I do to make it up to you in the meantime?" And then they follow through on that plan to actually fix it. Again, it's not that they're perfect. They're just self-policing and they're self-improving. And if they don't catch it and you catch them and say, "Hey, you know what? This really hurt my feelings." They're actually bothered and they say, "Wow, that sucks. I'm really sorry. Let's fix that. What do you need for me to take care of that? Because that is inappropriate. I'm really sorry that
Yeah.
that
It,
happened."
instead of, no, I didn't do that. That was your fault.
Right? Your
Right.
feelings are stupid. Here's why you're
Yeah.
wrong. Here's why your feelings are dumb and you shouldn't have them. Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. Now leave me alone. Go away so I can go live my life.
Correct.
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed when we talk about attachment styles is we get into these subcategories that are often referenced for personal labels. You hear people say AP, DA, FA, or
Oh, yeah.
ambivalent. And I'm sure there's more that I'm probably missing. But is having this level of understanding necessary and helpful for attaining a secure attachment style?
In my first few years of working as the attachment specialist, I refused to talk about attachment styles at all. That's why when you go through
Oh, I
my
bet.
book, Slaying Your Fear, you go through Slaying Your Fear. I not once in there do I talk about attachment styles, not once,
Yeah.
because if you start dishing out attachment styles, then the zodiac girls and the astrology girls on TikTok pick it up and say, "Oh, I'm an Aquarius and an anxious attacher, a
Yeah.
preoccupied anxious attacher," right? And then it becomes their label, and then they say, "I never have to change. You have to change and you accommodate me." And that's what happens. And that is the death of growth. That is opposite of everything that is true. You can and must become securely attached. Wherever you begin is just the label on where you're starting. It's not even a label. It's a constellation of behaviors that we have a name for that you can then begin improving step by step. That's all it is. It's not a diagnosis. It is not who you are. It's how you have behaved. Fix that behavioral pattern, change your brain chemistry, build better relationships, and then you are no longer insecurely attached. Whether it's DA or FA or whatever you may be, become securely attached. It's what we call earned secure. Maybe I didn't grow up securely attached, but I have earned my secure attachment. Build that. That's the goal. Don't
Yeah.
settle for less.
Amen, brother. Say it louder for the people in the back. Oh man, a lot of what I focus on in my content is I create memes around attachment and other relationship behaviors. I focus more on the behavior because if I can get you to identify that, if I can get you to see it, if I can show it to you in a way that's a little bit funny and it makes you laugh a little bit and it makes you think back on some of your past experiences and go, ah, that's what that was. That's what I was experiencing. And then you go and you read the caption and then you come and you listen to this episode with the attachment bro. All these things, we're connecting the dots as we go through the process. So the people that are unsure of what they're experiencing, or that, do I need a label? Is that going to be helpful for the men that are out there that are struggling with nice guy syndrome and anxious attachment? This is a great place to start with the memes to understand the behavior.
I love that. It is a process. No, you need to know where you're starting, but
Yeah.
it's, "Hey, why is my car not running?" You don't say, "It identifies as a broken radiator, and that's just what it's gonna be. I'm gonna have to drive a car with
It's
no
like that
radiator."
forever. Yeah.
No, you don't say that. You say, "You know what? My radiator is broken. Let me fix the radiator and, either slap some JB Weld on that thing and so it doesn't leak or get a new radiator or whatever I'm gonna have to do, but the car itself needs to run." We need to get your car into a functioning car so that you can have a working car, and not just a car that limps along, grinding and scraping and spewing flames. We need to get you a car that is working effectively. Let's swap out the parts that don't work. Let's replace those things. Let's lube the pieces that are grinding. Let's
Uh,
fix this car so you have a great car,
and
right?
it
Let's
doesn't
do
matter
that.
how old the car is.
I got my oldest client I ever had came to me was 78 years old. She
No.
was terminally ill. She was on 27 medications per day just to stay alive. She had 3 kids, she had 9 grandkids, and she had some like 30 great grandkids. And but she didn't have long to live. And she said, "Adam, am I too old to fix my attachment?" And I said, "If your goal is to live a hedonistic life full of pleasure, then yes, you are too old. But if your goal is to build a good life going forward where you have wonderful relationships and to pass those on to your kids as wonderful attachment and great relationships, heirloom skills, and teach your grandkids and great grandkids how to be a loving, fulfilling family so that the legacy when you pass away is a wonderful family that works together in this hard world, then no, it is not too late. Let's begin immediately." And you know what? Over the course of a year of us working together, she got sicker, but her family got stronger and healthier, and they grew together and bonded. And by the time she passed away, her family was right. They were ready to survive without her. They were stronger. Some of them had quit addictive behaviors. One of them had quit an abusive relationship she was in, and they were building a great family system going forward into the future. So, no, even if you're 78 years old, terminally ill with a year to live, it is still a right investment to fix your attachment.
Now, you brought up a really important point there, is that survive without her. Can you go a little deeper on that for me?
Oh, do you have kids?
I do not.
Okay. I have 5. I have 5. And that's to start, right? That's the
Yeah.
appetizer. We're gonna have 50 more or something. I have 5 kids, and legacy is on my mind all the time. I do not want a family system where my children can only survive because I'm propping them up. I don't want a family system where I'm chasing them and making them do the right thing. And I've seen all of the people in the generations before me, their parents die, and then all the boomers start fighting and squabbling over every little pen and every little scrap of money and every little piece of anything. They start bickering and fighting, and the family rips itself apart and they won't speak to each other anymore. I don't want that for my family. So we need to build that forward, going forward, that your kids will survive without you and that they will actually work together as a family without you, so that family doesn't just detonate with the death of the elder. The family grows, and yes, they'll mourn, but then they remember all the great things you taught them and they work together as a family. One of the most powerful things in this world is a unified family that becomes a force for good. That is what our world is built on. It's what the best changes have come from in all human societies, is healthy families building together. If you can build, that is your legacy.
I love that. Another thing that you mentioned in your book in context to that was they're not going to put your gaming profile on your tombstone. And taking this back to young people for a second, it's so true because it's like, what kind of life are you living? And who are you as an individual? What is your actual self image? Who is your ideal self? Are you willing to take the steps that are necessary to fill the gap that's in between that?
Yeah.
To build who you are as a person instead of taking all of this time away that you can never get back with your family, with your friends, with the people that are most important to you, with developing a legacy for yourself. We're so tied up in the coping mechanism of life, just trying to get by, just trying to survive, just trying to go unnoticed and not have people attack me all the time. I just want to live my life, leave me alone. And that kind of goes along with the incel community that I haven't really talked about in any of my other content, but I know that you've touched on it. I was hoping that you could just speak to them for a moment, and how would you help
Yeah.
them?
Man, I my heart goes out to guys who are struggling in the dating world right now. It is an absolute hell on earth for most guys in the dating world right now. If you have anxious attachment style, or if you are ethically avoidant, where you don't ever use any manipulation tactics, you're just really afraid of getting hurt, so you stay away from other people. If either one of those is active, you will come across as so terrified and nervous on your dates that women are immediately going to be turned off because they think there's something unstable about you. Women are not going to want to give you much connection time at all. And then you're going to see most of them gravitate toward guys that seem to treat them badly. Jerks. I just wrote about this on Twitter this morning, that jerks are able to mimic healthy behavior up front and confidence and swagger, and then they pull a bait and switch once the woman is in the relationship with them, where he then starts pressing avoidant behaviors on her and making demands of her and pushing away from her and refusing to meet her needs. And then the women often wonder what they did wrong to make him change, so they try and go overboard with making him like them and make him switch back to the good guy. And of course he won't, because those were mimicking behaviors up front to try to get her connected. The guys who are more anxiously attached or more nervous, they get rejected out of hand. They see that and say, why is she settling for abuse when I would give her love? And they say, women are awful, women are stupid, women are insane, what are they doing? It's evil. And then they find red pill circles, and red pill material is really built on flagging all women as being borderline personality disorder. They won't
Yeah.
say it that way, but they attribute massive borderline personality disorder traits to all women on the planet
Not
and call
realizing it's a
everyone a
reflection of
sociopath.
them in that moment, right?
And many of them have been burned by borderline women or had a
Right.
mom who was borderline, or whatever. But now they're saying, like, every woman on the planet. Yeah. And it's a reflection of their experience with women, the women they've pulled
Right.
in. Now, exactly. But the guys who are left in the dating lurch, research shows now that of Gen Z, 64% of men in Gen Z are single, and only 34% of women in Gen Z are single. So do the math on that one. The guys are being massively left behind. And not only in our country, but in Japan, they have someone has termed it the sexodus, where men are completely withdrawing, but men can't even find a wife over there, and the women don't even want to get married and have kids over there. Other countries all around the world, men are experiencing this massive lack of ability to even find a loving partner. To spend their life with, and I'm not talking a hookup, I'm talking like a wife. Like, they
Yeah.
want to get married and have kids, so many of them do, and they can't. And the problem for most of them is that they don't know how to even form human relationships. Most of them also don't have friendships, not deep ones. Most of them don't have mentorships. Most of them didn't have loving fathers. Most of them don't, they don't have the human connections they need. And that's many reasons why their brain chemistry is off, and many reasons why they come across as so desperate and nervous. And that is what is turning women off from them the moment they speak. Is That's what's happening. That's what's leading to the incel thing happening.
Then they've also connected themselves to things like pornography and other things that help them feel connected to at least something that's outside of them.
Yeah, and unless we just blame the men, yes, there are awful women out there. The majority of women are not awful. The majority of women are actually anxiously attached and are desperately craving approval and connection, and they don't know how to feel like someone cares about them unless that person's flooding them with good feelings right up front. And that's what they're looking for. And then they crave to be approved of, and they throw themselves into that relationship. And those guys see that and they think women are awful. Why would I even want to do this anymore?
For so many of us who identify with an insecure attachment style, we all started in the same place, the book Attached by Amir Levine. Whether that was given to us by an ex girlfriend who sent it priority mail, or somehow we were looking for the answers and we came across it on our own. Every few weeks, someone will mention that book in the comment section. And I always suggest, hey, go check out this article that was written about the author who said that if he had to do it all over again, he would have been more empathetic to the avoidant. So, in the online space, we demonize the avoidant to such a high degree. And I want you to share your experience with that in your own comment section.
I largely work nowadays with avoidant men. I still work with anxious people, but avoidant men have become the biggest cluster of people looking for my assistance. So much so that I just launched a video course called How to Love an Avoidant Man. My comment sections are flooded with three types of, let's say four types of people. One is avoidant men themselves saying, "Holy crap, you're the only person who doesn't treat me like garbage, and thank you. And I've never realized I had avoidant attachment style. This makes sense." Two is women who love avoidant men and say, "I want to help this man. I know I can show him love. He's never felt it. Please help me understand him so I can give him love." That's who that course is for. Number
Yeah.
three, though, is women who've been burned by avoidant men who want to go online and just smear them with feces as anywhere they can, scream at them, wail, gnash their teeth, rend their garments, burn them in effigy. The internet is their venting ground, and every comment section is filled with women like, we should put them on an island and then bomb that island. We should put them in a rocket and blast them into the sun. We should, like, all kinds of horrible things. And I see this war going on in the comments between those women and the avoidant men who are in that comment section. And the fourth group of people that come in that everybody forgets about is avoidant women. Nobody even
Yeah.
talks about them. Avoidant women who come in, they're a small portion of the population, but avoidant men and avoidant women get so demonized. And it's so sad because most of them, even our classification for avoidant people is dismissive avoidant. That's what they
Right.
get called. And people don't even differentiate between the few who use very manipulative, hurtful tactics that are dismissive and hurtful, and the vast majority of what I have termed ethical avoidant. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to get hurt. I won't manipulate people. I would be sad to hear that I had ever hurt anybody. I really just want to figure things out, and I focus on risk, and I'm trying to stay safe. And that's really what they're doing over here is security and safety and away from drama. And that's the vast majority of them. So all those people out there who want to demonize, all you're going to do is alienate. All you're going to do is make things so much
Yeah.
worse. Do we really need more alienation in our society and more polarization? I
Don't
think
think
what we
we
need to
do.
do is have a conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I recently had on Dr. Robert Glover, and we discussed no more Mr. Nice Guy. And what an awesome conversation that was to be able to have that with him. But we talked about the intersection of nice guy syndrome, attachment styles, and ADHD. I would like to know your perspective on that as well.
I think it's impossible to determine if someone has ADHD when they already have attachment issues and their brain chemistry is so vastly off. They are flooded with cortisol all the time, so their brain won't stop running. They are chronically agitated and they are binging dopamine to try to manage their feelings because they don't have another mechanism for managing it. I think that we have an epidemic of overdiagnosis and over medication of ADHD, so much so that even 7-year-old boys, the vast majority of them, about 14 to 15% of American boys now are medicated for ADHD, medicated, and schools are pushing it and forcing it. That's one reason I don't have my son in public schools because many of his peers have been forced by the school to take medication. Then they have to go find a doctor who agrees with the diagnosis that unqualified professionals have given. Otherwise, he'll be expelled for not taking medication the school has decided he has to take. That's where we're at. And I think that if we fix attachment first, we're going to find that the vast majority of problems that we think are epidemics go away.
I agree. And I think you guys can go back and listen to the beginning of this episode where we covered a lot of this. We've covered so much ground today on the Blueprint podcast. Adam, I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. Please tell everybody how they can reach you, follow you, and work with you.
First of all, thank you for having me on here and giving me this chance. My goal is to help 1 billion people around the world build
I
secure
love it.
attachment. I figure if we can get 1 in 7, then the world will take care of itself. So
Yeah.
thank you for giving me that chance with your audience. And everybody out there listening, thank you for also giving me that chance. I hope this has helped. If you want more information about me, you can find my website at adamlanesmith.com. There I have courses. I have the attachment bootcamp course, especially for anxiously attached people to show you how to fix it. I have How to Love an Avoidant Man for people who are in love with or who are an avoidant man. I have my coaching. I have every material on that website you need. If you prefer videos and you prefer long or short form, I'm definitely on TikTok as at Attachment Bro. I'm on Instagram as at Attachment Adam. And I have a whole YouTube channel at Attachment Adam where I have extended guides for all these attachment and relationship pieces. Check it out,
And
and I'm here to help.
And you also have an amazing Twitter feed that if you guys aren't following that, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. I'm not arguing about this. So calm down in the comment section. But it's absolutely amazing. You could sit there for the next several hours and just go through each one. And you're going to be like, yep, I've done that. That's me. I've experienced that. Man, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for putting that out there for us to read. It's an education to go through that. So definitely go check that out, guys.
Thank you.
Adam, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.